Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Shovel Knight, Plague of Shadows. In the last part, we took care of Polar Knight over in his stage, and now it's time for the final of the main Order of No Quarter stages against Propellor Knight. And this stage is a little interesting in that out of the entire ladder set of 3 levels, it definitely changes the level design up the most in some places, just to have Plague Knight take advantage of his abilities. There's a couple less of the jellyfish overall for you to pogo off of, but by and large, this stage isn't too different. Still got all the wind platforming and all that. There's gonna be points where there's some semi-auto scrollers. Keeping a good pace is the key in this level, I feel, because if you're rushing too much, you're probably gonna fall into the bottomless pits or get knocked back into them. And that happens to me a couple times in this, because this is definitely the level I think I died the most in this playthrough. With that said, as for Propellor Knight's own bio, this aerodynamic ace commands the Enchantress's flying machine with a cocksure attitude of a sky pirate. With his heli helmet, he can zoom short distances with ease. The Shovel Knight, they keep bringing that guy up, I don't know who they're talking about, encounters Propellor Knight on top of the aircraft as it zooms through the sky. Earth fights against air in a true battle of the elements. Pros! He's a talented fencer, and he's got a cool little mechanical heli helmet, and he's rather debonair. Cons, he's really arrogant, a bit on the lightweight side, and he's got an outrageous accent. From memory, this is also where I just start to be the most reckless with my money, because if I die and I can't get the bags, I'm not gonna like reset at this point, because I think I've already bought everything I really care about. The big thing about losing money in this game is that I would be a lot more sad about it if there was, say, achievements in the game for finishing the game without losing money, or if there was a in-game shop you could use your money at the end of the game and have it like banked into to buy some extra stuff like some concept art and something. Because I guess that would be the best way to do a money sink across all a treasure trove, is just like a concept art and extras shop to unlock some stuff. Sort of like how some games do it, like the Resident Evil games do nowadays, where the more achievements you get, the more you can invest in extras for New Game Plus, like having certain key items from the start, having more inventory space, all that kind of jazz. With that said, like I brought up, I think a part or two ago, on my first playthrough of basically any of the campaigns, it's these levels that I definitely die into the most, if only because wind mechanics are iffy with me in games. I don't think they're as outwardly annoying as, say, darkness mechanics, but I can definitely say that when a mechanic impacts your control, it's a different kind of annoying, if that makes sense. Because it doesn't break the pace, but it just alters the rules that you're used to, and I'm fine with that conceptually. But sometimes some levels with wind get a little bit overbearing or a bit too sudden, like I immediately think of the wind levels in Mario 2: The Lost Levels, because those have very little warning, and they're not exactly conveyed the best in a lot of the early releases. Thankfully, the wind in this is very visually obvious. But that said, it does have one of my least favorite enemy types, and that's just these little propeller dudes, because their entire thing is pushing you in a direction, usually towards the left, back into a pit, or I think in some cases, downwards? And they're just kind of annoying to get around on a consistent basis. Also, you might notice I still have the same amount of money I did when I died there. That's because I died on the way back there. Whoops. Unfortunately, Propellor Knight, since he can't use Shovel Knight's weapons, we can't use the Propeller Dagger, and that sucks because I love that thing. Also, we're coming up in the mini-boss, and because of the main strategy to beat this thing quickly, flashing lights warning, because the background, that solid black, is gonna flash purple pretty quickly. Because the best way to fight this thing is to use the Big Boom and just throw it willy-nilly, because the initial hit of the Big Boom does damage, but I believe with bosses like this, hitting them with the extended explosion can do extra damage on top of things like the component powder. And due to where it is on the screen, I recommend using the float powder, or the float casing, or the lob casing here, just to, you know, keep it in range a lot more. Because Plague Knight's moveset is very inherently focused on horizontal or diagonally downwards from you. Getting anything above you can be a little tricky without things like the float or lob casing on top of the Big Boom or Surging Strike. And now that I think about it, it's no wonder that they made that whole little showdown thing for Treasure Trove that's sort of Shovel Knight Smash Brothers fighting game kind of deal. Because thinking about it, the characters do have, like, a fair amount of, like, zoning potential on their own that's relatively unique between the characters. Also, this game consistently is one of the only games I can think of that really takes advantage of this particular mechanic of wind mechanics, where if you fall down from a higher space into them, you actually do sink further, and you need to do that to get over here, as Shovel Knight to get his sub-weapon, and as Plague Knight to give Chester his sub-weapon to get your new sub-weapon. And this one's a little different. In this level, Plague Knight gets himself the Staff of Striking. Attack in succession with quick staff strikes. It's a very close range attack, but you can mash it and do like, it feels like 8 to 9 damage in a row. It's really good for DPS against bosses if you can get them in a corner, but you're also probably going to be leaving yourself pretty open for damage in that case. It is good, but you need to be kind of careful about it, especially with how quickly you can eat up your power. I am not forgetting that music sheet like I did in the original LP. I got it eventually, but I had to backtrack through the level for that, and I think that was the only time I had to do that in that entire LP from memory. Sounds right. And I distinctly remember when that happened, I think I already talked about this way back when, but I remember distinctly with that particular music sheet missing it, thinking, well, I've checked every other pit in this level so far, and it's only been a fish or some health. So it's probably not that the only time I ignored a damn pin. It's the one that has a music sheet. I do appreciate that they tend to place cipher coins in such a way where, in the case you can just ignore a hazard with Plague Knight's abilities, they place the cipher coin in such a way that you have to at least kind of edge it close to the hazard in order to grab it. Because unlike some games with collectibles like that, you can't like collect them with projectiles or sub-weapons. You need to make contact with cipher coins in order to actively collect them. And if you could collect them with sub-weapons and such, it would honestly be a little bit too easy to get most of them. Particularly thinking of some actually in the next level that would be, any kind of threat for them would be completely wiped out by that. So good on them for actually realizing that they shouldn't make them collectible via projectiles. Also, prime case for why I hate that enemy type right there, right here. I hate the placement of this enemy, it's such a dick move. And the thing is, it's funny because most of the enemy placement in Shovel Knight's various campaigns is very... I'm not gonna say smart because it is inherently smart, but it's like, they're very deliberately placed to be part of the level design and extend the challenge. Seldom are there any there that are dick moves unless you're rushing. That's one that's just a dick move I find no matter what. King Knight has a couple of those as well, but the shorter level design of that kind of leads itself more to that anyway. Wind with auto-scrolling, though, is definitely a tricky idea to pull off, and I don't think the game does it too well until, like, the last 2 screens of the main level. If only because it makes the already, at times, kind of trotting pace of some auto-scrollers more apparent if you're actively having to fight the controls. It's like how in F-Zero, you have to make a lot of turns during areas with magnets, and it just never feels good, because you're trying to go one direction while you're being directly pulled to the other. Is the main reason I reached for that particular comparison because of rumors recently that F-Zero GX is coming out on Switch in some form? Yeah. I'd like to see it, but I'll believe it when I see it kind of deal. It's kind of like how long we had rumors for Metroid Prime Remastered. Yeah, it became a reality eventually, but it took so long that if we do get any kind of F-Zero port like that, it probably won't be until the Switch's successor, which we're even then supposedly going to see something about. And this is again dating this commentary during E3 season or later because of rumors that apparently Pokemon Scarlet Violet DLC 2 will launch with a hardware upgrade or alongside a hardware upgrade of some sort. And even then, given how my backlog is slowly weaning, this is probably going to come out probably by May or June, so we're only just around that season now, probably. This is being recorded just to even date this specifically on March 21st. This screen and the next one are probably the most interesting wind screens in the level in that they don't do what most wind levels tend to do, which is just pushing you left or right. These actively make you rise and fall at a certain rhythm. And you can just rush through this trying to like get to the far right as fast as you can using like Bomb Burst and all of that, or as Shovel Knight using the Propeller Dagger from this level. But they do intentionally design the level in such a way that you can just rely on the wind to get across no problem. Just make sure you don't rush, because if you do, especially with using the bomb burst incorrectly, that can happen. And I don't need that money anymore. I'm good. And if memory serves, we're coming up on the boss fight. And this one's a doozy, almost no matter which character you fight it as. I'd argue Propellor Knight is not the hardest boss inherently just due to his moveset, but there's one particular move that just makes him one of the most dangerous, similarly to how Polar Knight handled some things, now that I think about it. Let's see what Propellor Knight has to say for himself.
They let airheads have airships? Come down here, I need to borrow something.
How pedestrian! I was expecting the grand entrance! Substance over style always with you scientists. So I heard the most delicious rumor. You envy my suave, daring nature, do you? Get in line.
Don't flatter yourself, flyboy. Your essence is the teensiest part of my plan.
My essence can't be taken from me, but if you ask nicely, I'd consider giving you flying lessons. Of course, my pernicious pupil, I'll have to charge. So Propellor Knight, while he does land on the floor to do some dashes across with his sword, he mostly tends to stick to the air. You might want to use the lob or float casing for that in specific. The attack that makes him particularly dangerous is that he tends to do it towards his ladder health. Actually, he has two. One, he'll suck you in, which doesn't seem that bad on its own, but he'll occasionally summon an airship in the back, which will fire down cannonballs that will then break parts of the platform you're on. Now, I think it breaks it into thirds, and if he does the suck-in attack at that point, you can just get dragged into a bottomless pit with very little reaction time to be able to get around it. When he's just doing the bombs and the flyovers, it's not too bad, especially if you're using those two casings again, but this can definitely be a deadly boss pretty quickly if you just get knocked back the wrong direction or lose track of where you are because of how much is happening on screen. With that said, not gonna lie, Propellor Knight's probably one of my favorite designs out of the entire game. The helmet is kind of stupid, but it's cool at the same time. And that's all 8 members of the Order of No Quarter, which means now we're heading on towards Endgame. Not quite there, we got 2 videos left, but we're getting there, we're getting there. Hello, Percy. Despite Propellor Knight's crude courtship rituals, I am in his vessel as romantic. A fine setting for wooing a fair mare. By the way, I noticed Mona left a health potion among her notes. Surely it was meant for you. Take it. And that maxes out our health at a natural 7 units, meaning to get to max, you only need 3 potions. Incredible, the penultimate essence. Quite the accomplishment for you.
I wasn't working alone, at least not in the beginning.
Such humility! I realize I helped, but the credit largely goes to you. Well, anyway, the time is nay! I'll use Mona's decanter to pack up the essences for you. Be incredibly careful with these.
Thanks, Percy. Don't wait up for me.
I'm surprised this thing has a reverse feature. So, at this point, in the case you haven't yet, I recommend using whatever money you have to get the rest of the upgrades in the game. By this point, unless you've been dying a lot, you probably won't even need to grind to do it. Buy everything you can from Percy, get the upgrades from the magic system if you haven't, and go buy all the armors from the Troupple King. Also, in the case you want to, you can talk to this guy after you get the bait bomb to get a look at your stats for the game. It's from the witch character who was in the bar underneath the town in the Shovel Knight campaign. I don't think there's anything that's really tied to that besides just being like, hey, you've done this. Cool? Cool. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 10, we start our march towards Endgame. See you guys then.